Welcome to our Banking After Hours series, co-produced with Backbase, where we sit down with banking titans to get their views on the future of banking and beyond. We are joined by Muazzam Mohamed, who is the CEO of Bank Islam, and Ridi Dutta, who is the Regional Vice President in ASEAN for Backbase, a banking engagement platform. Now, Bank Islam is established in 1983. It is the oldest Islamic bank in Malaysia. While the bank has a storied history in the past, you guys have your eyes set on the future as well. I see that in efforts to keep up with rapid digitalization, you've launched a 4-year IT blueprint, and recently you've also launched a digital banking spinoff called PU. So let's begin the conversation with Muazzam. In your latest financial year results briefing, you mentioned one of the key priorities was to improve your mobile banking application, to look at strategic partnerships. Could you walk us through the specifics of these plans?
Yeah, this been an amazing journey, I would say. We started this digitalization journey for Bank Islam, at least under my watch, since 2019. And a large part of it was under the period of COVID and MCO and whatnot. And when we talk from the perspective of technology adoption of digital, for example, COVID, everybody says that, it accelerates the adoption of it. And we saw that in our environment, for example, just to quote, our transaction volume through our digital channels last year was double 2021. And that was already 2021, we saw significant growth compared to, say, 2019 because of COVID. So it continued to accelerate. Transactions through our mobile banking app Go, for example, went over more than 100 million in terms of volume, transaction volume. The year before was below 50 million. So, that goes to show how it has expanded. And to a certain extent, I've got to admit, it has sort of exceeded our forecast in terms of the way how people use the kind of volume that we are seeing and all that. So, giving an example, we have our internet banking, for example. We've got our mobile banking. That we launched it, prior to the COVID period and all that, with certain assumptions in terms of how people use it, how people interact with it, the kind of volume that it will take. But like I said, with what actually happened, it exceeded that. So we came to a stage to say that we need to accelerate in terms of the refresh and in terms of the offering that is got there. And obviously, in doing that, we also look at not just from the banking or financial space, we also look at in other industries as well. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about customer experience, our customers, they have got experiences not just with other banks, but they have got experiences with other tech sectors, with telcos, entertainments and all that. So this is where one of the things that we are doing is that we want to accelerate in terms of the refresh of our internet banking and also our mobile banking app. Try to think ahead. For example, in 5 years' time, how will be in terms of the interaction and the usage of our app, for example. So that is the thing that we are undertaking for this year. And the other thing that we do to further accelerate in terms of adoption, because we are also big into supporting the government's agenda on cashless and all that. So we do it through collaboration. So that's where that collaboration happens. And we work with a few agencies, for example, to accelerate that, because we also need to leverage on other parties, other institutions, infrastructure to be able to accelerate that. So I give you an example. We work with local authorities, for example, to convert certain locality to be fully cashless. So it means that we've got to onboard their merchants, we've got to educate the customers. We go to the market and to get people to at least adopt, do it now QR payments, for example, facilitation. And for the small merchant vendors and all that, for them to use that our GoBiz app, right, for the merchant. So these are the things that are in store for us that we undertake.
Yeah, I think certainly like an anecdotal evidence of that is the fact that nowadays you go to the nasi lemak auntie, you go to the chicken rice store, you can pay with QR code. Yeah. And I think working with these local authorities, you bring those who would really benefit from these services to be able to be on board this whole digital journey as well. And then you brought up one good point about how these technology players are reshaping experiences around it, and banks have to keep up with that, because it's like you can't just easily sign up for TikTok and then take like 5 years to sign up for a bank account, right? So really, in your observation around the market, like how do you think these big tech players have reshaped consumer experiences for banking?
I think they have really accelerated this change that Muazzam was talking about. Today we are used to, let's say, watching content on Netflix, right? Today we are used to shopping on Lazada or Shopee. It's not, I mean, yeah, we do still go out, but it's still probably more easy to check out and then order things on these sites.
Yeah.
I think the way these, and then Grab obviously, right? I mean, even before they came into the payment space, they had this simple ride sharing model. I think they increased the hunger for consumers to expect more from each of their service providers. And banks are nothing special, right? So they wanted that same experience, that same ease of operations when it came to bank. They wanted that same transparency.
Yeah.
I think that is very important, right? That Grab thought that you really know where your car is, you really know where your food is.
Yeah.
So the big 10 years helped this push, right? And today we're talking about digital banking licenses and all of that. Where did all of that come from? It came because there was a need in the consumer's mind that I need more from my bank. I
Faster,
need faster, better and simpler.
Yeah.
See, the experience that Muazzam was talking about, right? It's not about, and we have seen a lot of banks when they come to us and talk to us about really we want to change the experience of our consumers, they try to overcomplicate things. Consumers are not looking at complicated, they're looking at a very simple way of doing banking. Let's go back and take a step back. Why would a consumer reach out to a bank? Because they need some help, right?
Yeah.
On their daily life. They need to save their money better, they need to grow their money better, or they need to invest their money better. Is there somebody who can help them do that in a simple, intuitive, and seamless manner? With some amount of human touch, and you cannot really take that human touch out of banking.
No, for sure.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
and that's probably a topic for another day. You cannot really take out that human touch, even though we're talking about going fully digital. But how seamless can I do it for you, right? And that is what we are seeing as a trend. The second trend on the big techs is now, earlier it was looked at as competition. Now it's getting more into that collaboration space, right? And that's where banking as a service also comes in. All of that comes in.
Embedded finance. so
Embedded
many
finance
things.
comes
Yeah,
in. You
for sure.
have to coexist. A bank like Bank Islam today and let's say a big tech like shopping has to coexist because if I can really do my banking transactions and my shopping from one single place, then I have it as a consumer, right? So that collaboration now is getting more and more. It's out of that competition space. But that initial thrust, that initial acceleration that it gave to banks to really get out of their comfort zone and really relook at how customer experience should be, how customer journey should be. I think that big techs have played a really, really important role.
It's really shifted everything as well. And I think, Muazzam, when you took over as CEO, we noticed a lot of change in Bank Islam as well, right? And noticeably, you guys made a lot of effort to really modernize not just the IT, not just the digital aspect, but also the perception of Bank Islam as well. Going back to your 4-year IT blueprint, I think during your financial year, you mentioned that now you guys have entered the second phase of your blueprint.
Yeah.
So 2 questions on the blueprint. What are some outcomes from phase 1? And what can we expect for phase 2?
Yeah. Okay, so basically in terms of the phase 1, it's more of strengthening our base. Basically at that time, we just want to ensure that, from our infrastructure perspective, they're robust, they're efficient. We want to have a strong security, cyber security, for example. So
very
those were the
important.
priorities.
Yeah.
And they must be efficient to support the business that we are doing now currently. So that is the first phase. So we've got all of that in place. So the next phase, in the phase 2, is really in a way capitalizing on digital in a big way that drives our business. So when I talk about digitalization in the second phase, so it's not just about the infrastructure anymore. So it's also about, for example, we look at how does data now will enable us to grow business in terms of increase the wallet share and all that. So enabling big data is a big component, it's a critical component in our phase 2. So that the infrastructure perspective, the data lake and all that now comes into play. But the big data that we're looking at when we do it is not so much from the perspective of ease of use. It's also not just about, for example, increasing the wallet share and all that. It's also about managing our risk as well. For example, when we move forward, we want to go into new segment, we need to be able to look at alternative data, being able to come up with the right kind of decision tools from the data, from the big data, and we must have the ability to do that, for example, right? So that's one thing which is for sure. And the other thing is that, coming back to what you say, we also realize that, it cannot be just a banking app anymore, and you need to have the ability to be able to, like you did mention about embedded finance and all that. But how do we enable it? So this is where collaboration is very important. We also, like you mentioned, collaborate with other tech companies or the fintech, for example. And obviously, from infrastructure perspective, we put in place like the APIs and the SDKs and all that to enable, adopting these microservices to enable, a lot of new services to be plugged into our environment that will make it, even richer kind of experience for our customers. So, I mean, the next phase is really the one that I'm really excited about, because that will change significantly in terms of our bank going forward.
In many ways, phase 1 was building the groundwork
Yeah.
for phase 2, right? And like phase 2 is where the exciting stuff comes in.
Yeah.
And I guess embedded finance is kind of a good way to be in every touch point of our customer's life. Maybe before we move on to the next question, quickly to follow up on your whole digital plan, how does BU, your digital banking spinoff, play into this whole grander ambition? And I guess maybe I'll direct the question to you later as well, already, is how do you prevent cannibalization between the two banking units?
Yeah. So we're using BU as an opportunity for us to experiment new things. So it's experimenting on new next generation technology, experimenting in terms of new segments because of cannibalization. So we were very focused on creating a new segment that we're not strong at. So BU should be targeting that, for example, right? New ways of working, and even the way we hire people, the way how we structure team on agile basis and all that. It's really experimentation, and we put it into BU, but with a clear outcome, which is to come up with a digital bank, even though we're leveraging on the same license, but for all intent purposes, it's like its own digital bank, right? Has gone live. Fortunate, and there's a lot of learnings. And when we did that, because it's in way for us to experiment and to learn from that. So that's why from the get-go, we said that it needs to be done internally. And I'm proud to say that we launched using our internal resources, obviously with a lot of guidance and all that, discussion with consultants and thought leaders and all that. But we're able to do it ourselves. So the next step to it would be to be able to scale this up and to for it to be deployed throughout the bank. And what we've got over there is that we've got the learnings, what is the right thing to do, what are the things that we shouldn't do. And the other thing is that it gives confidence to say that, hey, we've done it, we've tested it, it works over here. And the next step is just a matter of how do we deploy it to the bank-wide.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a test bed as well. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Would you say it's accurate to describe your target market as more youth and more gig economy, just based on what I've seen your marketing is?
So like I mentioned, it's targeted to a segment that we're not strong at before. So we're very serious about it. We know the target segment. We know the personas of that target segment. We're creating the proposition that will appeal to this persona. And that's the new way. So it's no longer about coming up with a product and try to market the product. It's about understanding the persona, then coming up with a solution. So that's why, in terms of what we'll offer on BU, will be very relevant to that segment, the youth who are mainly in gig jobs, gig employment, gig economy, for example, right? And then using that as a base of that learning for us to be able to deploy. And obviously, even though I did say that it's a test, obviously it comes with a clear target as well, because some investments we put in there, and there's clear targets in terms of what they need to be able to achieve, because that also is also a learning in terms of the way how we do our digital marketing. What would be the best way to do it? All of it is about learning, and we need to do it properly. Then only we know that whether it works or it doesn't work.
You can certainly apply it back as well. So, really, when we talk about the potential for cannibalization, like Muazzam is also thinking about how it's very clearly defined, like the main mothership focuses on this, the speedboat focuses on this. Your observation with all the other digital banks you work with in Philippines and other markets as well, like how do they strategize to avoid this? Have you seen instances where cannibalization actually does happen in this market?
It does happen. It's because there is always going to be an overlap.
Right, yeah.
But I think the key is to what Muazzam said. The segmentation is very important. Very often nowadays we talk to banks, and banks have this question mark that do I consolidate everything on one single app, right? Or and build this one super app targeting multiple personas, multiple segments, or do I go horses for courses, which is and at times they look at DBS, right? So DBS has the main app and then they have Paid App, right? It's two different brands, very strong brands, but both are coexisting, right? Payla has a different purpose. The main app, Digibank, has a different purpose. We feel that if the segmentation is correct, and the segmentation cannot be very broad-based also. I'll give you examples. There's a bank that we are working with, without naming them. They have said we want to focus on sole entrepreneurs. Okay, not even the SMEs.
Right.
Within the SMEs, let's zone down into entrepreneurs, the sole proprietors, the sole entrepreneurs.
Like a really micro.
Very micro, right?
Right.
10 members, 15 members, that size, because that's not being addressed. And they are launching a different experience, a different proposition for them, which is they already have 3-4 different apps, but this is going to really stand out, right? That it's not a corporate app, it's not a wholesale app, it's not a retail app. What does it do? It takes care of things like expenses. It takes care of things like invoicing, right? It takes care of things like payrolls, which a sole proprietor would be, they would be otherwise spending a lot of time doing this manually.
Certainly.
So this segmentation becomes very important. And if the segmentation is correct, now in the case of this bank, if they can launch this properly with the right segmentation, with the right set of journeys that a sole proprietor wants, the sole proprietor is not going to go back to the main banking app because they would get what they need for their business from this app.
Yeah.
The cannibalization would happen when the same sole proprietor would have a retail persona.
Of course.
As an individual, I also bank with this particular bank, and I would probably use the mothership app for it. But that's okay, right? So that segmentation becomes very important. There's another bank in Vietnam that is already working with us, and they have gone to the market. They have 3 different apps. And when they started this journey with us, even we questioned them that, guys, you already have a main bank app. You already have an app which is focused on lending. They have a separate app just for lending, right? And then you're trying to launch a third app, which is, they call it like you, be you. They call it as you. So they have a you as well, right?
It's all about you.
It's all about you, right? And they said again, no, my lending app is for people who need money, certain ticket. This app is for people who have just started earning. What will they do with their money, right? Can I give them a better deposit interest rate? Can I give them a credit card with less verification, right? So again, they went into, and they had very high, given Vietnam's population is also big, it's a young economy, they had very high numbers that they wanted to target. And the good part is that they are almost on their track in terms of achieving those numbers that they had set for. So I think the multi-app or the different brands works as long as the segmentation is very clear. And the management, and that's why, people like Muazzam play a very strong role. The management does not change direction midway. I've seen that happening also in some quite types, right?
Yeah, it does happen.
You start with something and then 2 years later, okay, no, let's rethink, let's redo. That's probably where certain things go wrong. Because the moment you question the basics of where you started off, you are sort of
it's very disorienting.
You're reinventing.
Yeah. I think certainly, if we talk about segments like solo entrepreneurs, I think traditionally the banks are not even really interested in the segment. Some would consider unbankable, right? But now with this kind of digital technologies, you're specifically designing the service around them. So huge untapped market over there. Maybe switching gear a little bit. I think Malaysia has a huge focus in establishing ourselves as a leader in Islamic finance, Islamic digital financial services, right? Banks like Bank Islam, you guys are a venerable institution in this space. What role do you think you guys play in helping Malaysia further our ambitions in cementing ourselves as the leader in this space?
I think we've got that branding to say that we are the center of Islamic finance.
Yeah.
So that is works for us. So now what we need to plug in will be in terms of from the digital perspective of Islamic finance, because end of the day, it's within Islamic finance to do, for example, financial inclusion. So that's why
it's in line with the principles.
Serving the underserved is important.
Yeah.
And digital technology enables us to do that. So the way I see it is almost synonymous, basically, because here we've got an enabler to enable us Islamic financial institutions to be able to do more of what we need to do.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why I'm very excited. And the reason why we do this is exactly for that, financial inclusion. Now there's certain segments that we know before this were, because of whatever reason, requirements and whatnot and risk considerations were not considered by the banking industry simply because they were considered risky. And that risk, or they're considered risky, is because banks do not know enough about them. And why banks do not know enough about them? There's not enough information that's available to the banks for this segment. But with digital and technology, and we are experimenting this with BU, where we gather the information about them, even before they say that I want to apply for financing, for example. But by the time they come to us, we already have gotten their score
Right.
without them even realizing it. And
It's
that's
already
the
working on the
power of
background,
digital
yeah.
and technology.
Yeah.
And the way I see it, that, you know, for Islamic banks, and especially for us, this is where we're excited about, because it enables us to pursue this financial
Certainly.
inclusion agenda.
Yeah, I think it's a big agenda on Bank Negara this year. They recently launched an entire new framework that's just focused on financial inclusion. So
Yeah,
quite
exactly.
exciting stuff. I think one thing that we noticed in Malaysia is that most of the Islamic banks, they are under a larger banking group. Right? So
Yeah.
you have your conventional arm and your Islamic arm of these banks. There is a perception that sometimes with these setups, the Islamic banks just lean on the conventional bank for technology. Is that something that you observe in this space, really, in Malaysia?
I would say Malaysia is a bit different also, because yes, you have the larger conventional
Yeah,
banks and
yeah.
then the Islamic offshoots, but then you have standalone Islamic
Yeah.
banks as well, right?
Much like Muazzam's
Islam.
bank, yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
possibly the only country that I see in the region. Obviously, this from a region perspective, I think Malaysia and Indonesia are probably the only two countries, and then there is Brunei to some extent, where Islamic banking is prevalent. But even if you extend the horizon to Middle East and to the Gulf, more often than not, Islamic bank has always been an offshore. Like what Indonesia does. Indonesia it's all the Islamic banks are always going to be a part of a larger conventional bank, right? So in that way, Malaysia is a bit unique. You have Bank Islam, and then there are obviously a few others, right? We talk about them.
Yeah.
So that's one part. The second part is, again, you know, when we started talking to banks and financial institutions in Malaysia 3-4 years back, we were doing our homework, and we never realized that, and we always think Islamic banking means Middle East, right? Means probably Saudi would be first. We never realized Malaysia is number one out of that. There are 80 odd countries which practice Islamic banking. Malaysia is number one. We never realized that.
Yeah.
And I think if you draw it back, it's because of standalone Islamic banks existing and competing with conventional banks head on. That has also now resulted in, and as Muazzam was talking about technology being a role, almost 30-35% of the Islamic fintech industry is based here.
Yeah.
Right? Again, I mean, while the Middle East is such a big market, still 1/3 of that fintech is happening out of Malaysia. Goes to show that this market is a bit different from the other markets where Islamic banks have always been under a conventional bank.
Yeah.
It's a bit different out here. It's a bit different out here. And you see it the way vendors like us, technology players like us also approach this market very differently compared to some of the other markets. And it's unanimous. It's not just from us at Backface. Even my peers in the industry, they look at Malaysia in a very different lens compared to other countries where Islamic banking is prevalent.
It certainly is an opportunity for Malaysia to cement ourselves in the global
absolutely.
arena. This is like Hong Kong, Singapore is so near to us, and they all have their own financial hub status.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the niche that we can own, the niche that we can
Absolutely.
really grow as well.
And now, just to add, I think you're talking about the regulators, right? So obviously the banking space is there. And now with, in the similar focus coming on insurance, that's also going to probably add on, the digital insurance and everything else coming in, right? I think
Certainly.
that's also going to be
Takaful,
Takaful
insurance.
and everything,
yeah.
right? So it's going. Another interesting point, right? If you look at the 5 applicants who got the licenses, very clear, 2 out of the 5 are Islamic.
Correct, yeah. I think that's a key point for Bank Negara.
It's a very key point.
Yeah.
In fact, not just 2. If you dig into what the other 3 are doing, there's going to be an element of Islamic financing
Yeah,
there
like
as
down
well.
the road, yeah.
Down the road. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool. So let's wrap up by some future thinking stuff, right? So many exciting things happening, and honestly, even as a media organization, we struggle to keep up with all these rapid changes as well. What are some things that, maybe we'll start with Muazzam, then back to Rudy, what are some things that you find most exciting in the medium to long term?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, in Bank Islam BU, for example, what we're building is, like I mentioned just now, we look at the persona and we understand the segment and what do they really need. That's the reason why, we have brought in, for example, Gig Marketplace into the platform as part of BU, and we continue to look at for this kind of segment. I mean, what would be important for them? Because the other thing that we're pursuing is financial inclusion. So for this segment, I mean, one thing that always look out for will be their ability to earn more income, to increase their income and all that. So how do we enable that? For example, is it going to be more training and all that? Then it's got to be made available over there. And for solopreneurs, what do they need? For example, like bookkeeping and all that. That's going to be available. We're also looking at from the perspective of the coming up with innovative product that caters for them. So that's why this micro takaful, microfinancing, and in terms of personal financial management, it's going to be important. And the other thing that I'm excited about will be in terms of the kind of collaboration that we can do with fintech. So I'll
Certainly.
give you an example. We collaborated with this one fintech to develop a financial management tool.
I
We did
remember that
BU,
one. Yeah,
for
that's very
example, right?
interesting
So
one, yeah.
hopefully that will be launched by April. And we look forward to more of such collaboration that, again, can enrich in terms of the functionalities that will be relevant to our segment, that will be relevant to what they need in their lives. And this is where, building that kind of infrastructure to be able to plug in and work in collaboration with fintech. Like you said, sitting where I was like 4 years ago, we always thought about the threat and the competition and all that. But what I see now,
Different
in terms
world.
of from our perspective, is really about collaboration. Because there's always that kind of strength that incumbent banks like us can bring in. There's always that strength that the tech company can bring in.
Certainly.
Because at the end of the day, when we talk about digital banking, it's digital and banking, right? So it's not just and we saw when the emphasis is all put in terms of ease of use and just channels and just reach, and then forgetting that banking part, that's where some of digital banks overseas also struggle. So I mean both can bring in that kind of strength and collaboration. That's more that we can offer.
It certainly sounds like banking is moving from a transactional relationship to a more value-added relationship in
Exactly.
both the consumer and also the corporate's lives as well. Right? So some really exciting stuff to look forward to. We will look forward to covering the new announcement in April as well. Keep us posted. Really, what are some things that are exciting you at the moment?
I just wanted to add first what Muazzam said, right?
Yeah.
That we need to look at digital as a lever for business outcomes. Technology is always a means to some business outcomes, right? And if you, again, very simple, let's try to simplify things. If you look at 3 or 4 pillars that banks are looking at from a consumer perspective, how can I reduce my cost of acquisition? Can digital help me do that? How can I reduce my cost to serve? And then reuse that same funds for something else, which is, can I increase my share of wallet?
Yeah.
And then finally, very importantly, how can I increase my loyalty and retainment? Because this competition is huge, right? So every bank is offering something better. But how can I make my customers loyal? Can digital help a bank achieve some of these ROIs, achieve some of these metrics? And that's a discussion we like to have with bankers, that it's not about technology. It's not about, obviously, the microservices matter, the APIs matter. But end of the day, can it facilitate some of these business outcomes?
Yeah.
And if it can, then there is a game that we are talking about in the right sense of it, right? Now, from where I possibly see the next few years, and that's possibly where Malaysia as a banking economy is, there's a little bit of catch-up, if I may use the term. And I could be wrong, right? Some banks have already embarked.
Everybody's in different phases.
Is getting into that platform economy. I still see some banks in Malaysia talking about, yes, we are doing a lot of things, but those things are still happening in a bit of silos here and there. It's still not coming into one single unified, the platform economy that we talk about, the platformification. That's where, Grab or Uber or Netflix have really, just started with that. Now, banks have always had to play catch up. Possibly the next 12 to 18 months we're going to see a little bit of that, of moving banking towards a platform economy and letting all these, nice experimentations, nice collaborations happening, but not in silos, in a platform. That's something I look forward to, and I think Malaysia is going to see a bit more of that in the next 12 to 18 months. Some of the other markets have started. Malaysia, I think, there's a little bit of catch-up. And that's my sense, right? But yeah, exciting times for sure.
It is. I mean, platform economy itself is something that I think we can go on for hours about.
Absolutely.
And with some of the platforms actually getting the banking license, certainly in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll see some development there. With that, gentlemen, thank you for your time. It's been a very insightful conversation.